Ferrari's getting aggressive in its attempt to address a disappointing performance in F1 2023, but it's probably going to take a few years to pay off. The intention was to give Charles Leclerc and Carlos Sainz a car that can fight for regular wins and a championship this year. Ferrari has failed to do that with a big backward step from 2022, and there are too many problems to fix to make a title challenge in 2024 likely. But at least big moves are afoot to transform Ferrari's prospects in the long term. Ferrari changed team bosses for the fourth time in less than a decade over the winter, with Fred Vasseur arriving in place of Mattia Binotto. Vasseur took over a Ferrari team that had a very competitive car in 2022, but watched both title challenges fall apart due to a range of issues, including poor reliability, team errors, and driver mistakes. This season's Ferrari is simply not as competitive. After 12 races, it has 191 points compared to 314 at the same stage last year, no wins and only 3 podiums. Ferrari's fourth in the Constructors' Championship, 56 points behind Mercedes in second, and even trailing Aston Martin. It's not even worth talking about the gap to Red Bull, which Ferrari has completely failed to get anywhere near, despite spending much of last season with the fastest car. But Ferrari has been quicker, or can be quicker, than the basic results of 2023 so far show. That's part of why this season has been such a frustrating waste. Ferrari's in a strange position for a team with the second fastest car on average. Unfortunately, there is still a familiar sense of wasted opportunity, and some causes are similar as well. Leclerc lost a third place in the opening race to a failure and needed a grid penalty at the very next Grand Prix as a result. Other results have been compromised by penalties, miscommunications, or mistakes from Leclerc or Sainz. Ferrari started the season with high expectations, but quite early on it understood that it would be a challenge as some weaknesses became apparent with the car. It's been openly discussed that one of Ferrari's problems is how peaky its car can be. As soon as it's knocked out of its best working window, it's very difficult to drive. And despite major upgrades intending to address this as early as Australia and again in Spain, and claiming there have been improvements, the jury's still out on whether Ferrari really does have a handle on it and can make a real change. How else can you explain the drivers still complaining of the same kind of inconsistencies in performance, or Ferrari being second best in Austria, barely scoring points in Britain and Hungary, and returning to being second best in Belgium? Part of the reason Ferrari can look so good one weekend and so bad the next is how competitive the group is behind Red Bull, which requires each team in that group to do a near perfect job. With so many teams in the mix, Mercedes, Aston Martin, Ferrari and now McLaren, the punishment is falling from being a podium threat to barely scoring points if a team gets it wrong, which Ferrari has several times. Some elements of Ferrari's season that feel worryingly familiar include radio communication issues and some stressed in-race strategy calls. Vasseur has preached better communication from the start, but there have been flashpoints like Leclerc getting a needless grid penalty in Monaco for impeding in qualifying. Within another wasteful season is the hope of what is possible when Ferrari's car is in the sweet spot and everything comes together. Vasseur's hope for the second half of 2023 is to at least stop with the missed opportunities and fight for second in the championship, which would at least show that the race team is getting closer to the standard it needs to be at after serious question marks in recent years. Along with pretty much every team that isn't Red Bull, Ferrari needs to strengthen its command of the ground effect rules, especially as there's another technical issue we've heard about as well, porpoising. The buzzword of F1 2022 has been almost a non-issue this year, at least publicly, but the aerodynamic phenomenon of high-speed bouncing when the car gets too low to the ground will pretty much always lurk in the background in these rules. And it's interesting and probably significant that Vasseur has mentioned it as if it's something that has specifically impacted Ferrari. He suggested to us before the summer break that there had been some developments in the wind tunnel that worked, but then the car in reality needed to run at a higher ride height to avoid porpoising, and suddenly the performance step was lost. It further emphasises the reality that there's a need to improve Ferrari's technical ranks. But Vasseur knew this early on and has been working on it behind the scenes. It's been mostly silent since early season news and rumour of various staff leaving Ferrari and others potentially doing so as well. The exits of people like David Sanchez have inevitably been played down, with the argument being that he was not an essential figure as head of vehicle concept, nor a hugely effective one. One anti-Sanchez theory in the paddock is that given Ferrari started 2022 well enough but failed to progress, then clearly hit a wall in 2023, his concept didn't have enough potential to begin with. But Sanchez is now joining McLaren, which is saying the opposite, that the concept role is vital, and Sanchez, who was a central figure to all the race-winning Ferraris in the hybrid engine era, is a key acquisition. Funny how the two sides see it so differently. Nonetheless, Ferrari has jobs to fill, and it continues to be linked with poaching all manner of Mercedes and Red Bull staff members, with the first major acquisition expected to be Loic Serra joining from Mercedes, although probably not until 2025. Serra has not been specifically named by Ferrari, and neither side is commenting to conduct negotiations about any potential contractual release in private. As Mercedes performance director, Serra is one of the team's most senior engineers. He's an expert in vehicle dynamics, particularly the interaction between tyres and suspension, a defining relationship on a racing car. It's also been rumoured in Germany that Serra could be part of a push from Vasseur to woo a third Frenchman, Pierre Vacher, Red Bull's technical director. While Adrian Newey inevitably gets all or most of the attention for Red Bull's success from the wider public, Vacher's contribution is colossally underestimated. He is highly valued within Red Bull and apparently expressed his desire to stay with the team earlier this season. That was when it first emerged Ferrari had attempted to poach various senior technical personnel from Red Bull, starting years ago with a failed move for now Aston Martin technical director Dan Fallows. More recently, Vacher and head of aerodynamics Enrico Balbo became targets, which prompted team boss Christian Horner to discuss the rumours with both Vacher and Balbo, who assured him of their commitment to the team. Whether Serra joins as part of a clutch of top engineers from rivals or not, he will inevitably be a great addition to Ferrari. But his impact will not be felt for a long time, as he might only start work in 2025, and even then, that means he could begin to influence upgrades that season, but won't contribute to the core car concept until 2026 at the earliest. So this is very much about building for the future, and could be a key pillar of Ferrari under Vasseur, who must be allowed to see it through, given the extremely long lead times involved. Why bring him in as team boss and let him put such long-term plans in motion just to get trigger happy before those plans have any chance of bearing fruit, and restart the process with another leader who might have a different set of ideas entirely? It's not good enough for Ferrari to say, okay, we have some big names joining in 24 or 25 and we'll be competitive when they arrive. That won't cut it. The fact is that Ferrari's existing technical team has been too cautious with some ideas, not creative enough with others, and missed potential problems during the development process too. That's why, whatever the specific shortcomings of the SF23, Ferrari's ended up creating a car that doesn't have the same peaks as the Red Bull, isn't as consistent, and doesn't have as much development potential either. Bigger changes are almost certainly required for the 2024 car, let alone 2025. And Ferrari needs to quickly show it can actually add proper performance, starting with the rest of this year. Other teams like Aston Martin and McLaren have done a better job over the winter and in season, and Mercedes is clearly better at maximising the potential of its package each weekend, even if it's also fallen short of expectations. Every team faces the same situation in terms of budget cap and development options, give or take the differences from the sliding scale of aerodynamic testing restrictions depending on where a team is or finished in the championship. But it's not just about money and wind tunnel time, it's about fundamental season-long design choices, what avenues there are to explore within the restrictions those choices impose, and how good a team's understanding is of its weaknesses and how to solve them. Whatever combination is holding Ferrari back from big progress this season, the team knows it's not going to make a step of 4 or 5 tenths from one race to the next, a la McLaren when it introduced a major upgrade. Development of the 2023 car is still important though. One of the issues, as we've already noted, is that Ferrari's car seems to be the most temperamental of that lead group, and improving its sensitivity to different conditions was never going to be solved by one upgrade earlier in the year. There's a common consensus among observers that Ferrari has some fundamental issues with key parts of its car design that's holding it back. Ultimately, with architectural choices Ferrari has made last year and kept for this year, there will only be so much progress possible this season. There are still relevant lessons to be learned, and that's why Ferrari will be developing the 2023 car for a while yet, but wholesale changes are probably on the cards for 2024 and beyond. They have to be, because what Ferrari has done so far hasn't worked. And it needs to do a much better job in the future, whoever is leading or part of the technical team, if Ferrari is to have any chance of challenging Red Bull in this rule cycle or the next one.